Welcome to Siren Flies. Today we're tying a baitfish pattern on a size 12 hook. This hook is from Green Caddis Outfitters. It's a 2488 style hook. The first thing we'll do is add some lead wire to the center of the shank. And I like to add about 5 wraps of wire. I just happen to have a little small spare piece of wire, and I hate wasting fly tying material, so I'm going to go ahead and use that and wrap it around about 5 times. And I position this wire such that it is not directly behind the eye of the hook. In fact, it's about the middle of the shank of this hook. And that, as we get into this fly, you'll see later why I like to leave space behind the eye of the hook. So make sure and smash down the ends of your lead wire so that you don't have to worry about your thread getting hung up and torn up as you wrap around the shank of the fly later. Now we'll add some Zap-A-Gap. Make sure and use a liquid superglue as opposed to a gel superglue for this step. That way the superglue will soak into the lead wraps, and then spread them out with a bodkin. It just speeds up the drying process. And if by chance you add too much, just grab a tissue and dab it away real quick. So I used UTC 140 in white on this hook, and we'll go ahead and tie in our thread. Alright, next we'll add in our first clump of Ice Dub. In this case, it's going to be UV Cinnamon. And so Ice Dub fibers are generally all about the same length. So what I do is I'll take the clump that I start with, and then I'll twist and pull and then realign the fibers so that all the fibers are approximately the same length, and I'll tie in the middle of those fibers to create a point at which I can brush back the Ice Dub fibers and create that tapered body that we're looking for. So I'll go ahead and put a couple wraps in front just to kind of tighten everything down, and then we'll go ahead and wrap a little bit forward and strip out any excess with our fingers. Later we'll come back with an actual brush. So the next clump is going to be Pearl, and this clump is actually going to be tied in just a little bit differently, but we'll go ahead and repeat the same process of aligning the fibers and then tie again in the middle of the clump to ultimately brush it back. But what I do that's different about this particular clump is I'll tie it in the middle, just like the one before, but I also try and spread these fibers out so that they cover the whole middle of the hook. And now we'll add a couple wraps just in front of it to tighten everything down. But they're spread back as opposed to just directly folded back. And this is to create kind of a thicker midsection. Now we'll take the comb and go ahead and brush some of this excess fiber out to thin things down. Alright, and you can see it's starting to look a little bit more like a baitfish. And now we'll add UV Light Olive as our top Ice Dub. We'll repeat the same process, and now remember we're building a baitfish, so we generally want to add some sort of a darker color to the top of this fly. And that's my general approach to any baitfish pattern, is to add that kind of a darker streak to the top of it. And you can see some of the different varieties at the end of this clip in which I do that with all these baitfish patterns. So we'll do the same thing as we've done before. It's just another layer. This time, again, we're going to tie like the very first clump and just fold it all straight back. And so we have a nice 3 different color baitfish profile here. And so we'll go ahead and just kind of clean it up, pull any loose fibers out, and make sure and keep the fibers. They're still good. They just need to get added back into the clump or your dubbing section. Now we'll give her a whip finish to go ahead and wrap this fly's head up. And I broke the thread, oh well. But we're going to coat this in Tuffleye in a little bit, so we'll just go ahead and clip this down, and that'll ensure that this all gets locked in tight. You'll notice I keep stroking fibers out of this fly, and that's as I tie, the fibers come loose, and I just continue to keep working stuff out. So we'll go ahead and put 3/16 size eyes on here. And in this case, I used the oval pupil eyes. I just thought that they looked cooler and went ahead and used those. But make sure you place them so they face the right direction. And so we'll just attach these by hand and go ahead and tack them together. Make sure they line up right. And then once I've got these eyes pretty well smashed on there and they're in place, I'll go ahead and add some super glue to the area in between the eyes. This is just to lock them in place so that if by chance I happen to bump them, or as I'm adding the Tuffleye in between them in a little bit, I don't displace the eyes. I like to add it to the bodkin, just put a drop on the tip end of that, and then use that to actually insert the super glue on the eyes, or really in between them. It's just to soak in enough around the base of the eye to tie them and lock them in place on the hook. Alright, so the next thing we'll do is go ahead and add Tuffleye Core to the area in between the eyes. I use their finest tip to do this. And we'll go ahead and squirt it just in between. I don't coat the whole eye. I just add it in the middle, in between the two eyes, and try and basically fill it up to the point that the eyes become one solid cylinder. You're going to have the occasional stray fiber kind of get in the mix. I don't get too torqued about that. This first layer, I'll stroke the fibers back to try and get them out of the way. But if I have a couple odd fibers that are sticking out of the fly, once the Tuffleye has been hardened, you can go back in and just clip those out. So now we'll go ahead and grab the Tuffleye light and go ahead and blast this fly. You have to use a lot of core to fill in this gap, and I usually end up keeping the light on this fly longer than the usual 10 seconds. If it's still kind of tacky and gooey when I think it's done and I'll attempt to touch it, then I'll go back in and hold the light on it longer. Like I said, it's a lot of Tuffleye to get that filled. So here's our bait fish pattern now that it's finished. And I like to tie this in a bunch of different colors, and if you change the eyes, you can get some really different and dynamically variable types of bait fish and really get some colors that pop. And if you tie some of these up and you have some success with them, please feel free to share it. And you can share it through any of the social media that Siren Flies is on. Good luck. Thanks for tying with us.